Okay, so in the last lecture, we were talking about evolution and how that leads to diversity, and natural selection, adaptation, all those different key variables. And we left off with talking about limiting factors and how every species has certain environmental conditions that it needs to survive. And that little window is what we call the limiting factors. And they have tolerances. Like I can only survive within this range of pH or this range of temperature and so on. And then that's what those species have adapted to over the course of their evolution. Well, those species are in a community because a community has a given set of abiotic conditions, and that creates a community dynamics. Then we left off with talking about species we call indicator species. These are species that are present under very, very specific conditions. And if the species decline or disappear altogether, it should send up a big flag that there's a problem with your ecosystem. The environmental conditions are changing. And we talked about honeybees and different frogs, euglena, mayflies. All of those tend to be found in environments that are somewhat sensitive. 3 out of 4 are aquatic species. So that's a huge, huge flag. If those disappear, it means your water is problematic. There's issues associated with the aquatic system. So what we want to look at now excuse me, is this thing called ecological niche. What is a species job or role? What does it do in the given ecosystem? Every species has a different job. We call it the niche. They survive in certain environmental conditions, and they have a certain functional role within the community. Some species are what we call generalists. These are broad spectrum jobs. They can do a lot. So these guys are not specialized. Oh, if I can spell it right. They're not specialized in a very, very narrow set of environmental conditions. Raccoons, possums, things like that. They can survive in a lot of different environments, eat a lot of different foods, do a lot of different things. Specialists, these guys have a narrow range of jobs that they can perform. So they are often found in limited environmental conditions. So they do specific things. They're important. They're really good at what they do, but their range is pretty narrow. So the 2 examples here, we got an American alligator, and then we have a boa constrictor. All right, they both have a very similar job. They're both specialists. They're top-level predators, top-level carnivores. Normally, these guys should be in completely opposite ecosystems. They should not cross paths. You have a top-level predator in Florida Everglades. You have a top-level snake down in the Amazon. They shouldn't run across each other. But the problem is, when they do overlap, whether they're introduced, boas, anacondas, all these snakes showing up now in Florida, or by chance the range expands and then they come across each other, then we get into a problem. Well, we get into a situation, competition, and potential ecosystem disruption. If it happens naturally, whole different set of outcomes than if it happens in a short period of time because of human introduction. So when those 2 species that do the same thing show up in the same environment, they go into this thing called competitive exclusion. Basically, they're fighting for their jobs, fighting for their position in the ecosystem. So competitive exclusion says 2 species cannot occupy the same ecological niche at the same time. You can't have 2 top apex predators that feed off of the same stuff because there's not enough food to support 2 species. So it disrupts food chains. So when anacondas and boas and pythons all got introduced into the Florida Everglades, completely disrupted the ecosystem. And they're still seeing it. There's huge issues with the ecosystem in the Everglades being disrupted because of these top level predators now, in a sense, fighting it out between each other to see who's going to survive. So when we get these two top level species, or any two species that do the same job, there are a couple different things that can happen. They can do what we call resource partitioning. We'll get into that in a second. There might be adaptation, there may be speciation, or there may be extinction occurring. So those tend to be the outcomes of competitive exclusion. So imagine two people trying to do the exact same job, or you're at work and they bring in somebody else that does the exact same thing as you. What are you going to do? What's going to happen? In the case of resource partitioning, you share the resources. So here's our example. All these warblers share that tree. They pick different areas of the tree so that way they're not directly fighting each other for the food on the tree. Instead, they choose different locations. All right, you take the top right, I'll take the bottom left, I'll take the center right, etc. So now you don't fight each other over the food. Resource partitioning typically happens when there is plenty of resources available. When there's a lot of food, then sure, let's share it. But when food gets scarce, then we see species falling back to, can I adapt? Can I maybe eat a different food source? Because I'm losing this fight, I'm going to have to switch my diet. Or can I evolve over long enough periods of time, go through speciation, and my species actually evolves into something different? Or do I go extinct? It's what happens to a lot of species. So you look at these examples, some of these guys went extinct because of competitive exclusion. Others, well, that was us. That was all on us for why they went extinct. But anytime species get together, and it happens in every community, there's always species interactions. Species interacting with each other and with other species. So competition is a major, I don't want to say concern, but major interaction with species. Intraspecific competition is competition within a species. So our two rams down there are both fighting for food, shelter, territory, mates, etc. The greatest competition you're ever going to have is within your species. So let's put a little asterisk up here. That is where you will find the greatest competition. Your own species has exactly the same needs as you. Now, interspecific is competition between two different species. So you got lions and hyenas, both competing for similar resources. Who's going to get the food? Who's not going to get the food? There's going to be an overlap of resources and requirements, but it's not exactly the same because they're not the exact same species. So we want to keep that in mind when we're looking at competition. How does this influence community dynamics? And in the big picture, it can actually be good because the strongest tend to survive those competitions, reproduce, pass on their genetics, and so on. So, okay, other species interactions we want to take a look at. These will include things like predation. So predation exists in every single community. Everything is food for something else at some level. Predators. This is the organism that feeds on something else. And it's real easy to say, oh, we got a hawk eating this mouse, there's a predator, there's a prey. Rabbits eating grass, fish eating plankton, cows munching on grass, etc. That's all predation. It's just we don't tend to think of it in the same fashion because, oh, it's a cute rabbit, or here's a cow or the fish. But when you eat something else, that makes you a predator. Now, you can be a predator But if there's something above you in the food chain, you now become the prey as well. So you sit in between species in the food chain. So we talked about that before. Think about food chains here. Now, there are times where we will see this thing called predator-mediated competition. So if one predator eats a whole bunch of one prey population, it may actually allow a second prey population to increase. Because if two prey populations, let's go with the easy example. You got squirrels and you have mice. They're both feeding on sometimes similar resources, eating the same things. Maybe they use similar habitat. And the hawk comes in and eats a bunch of mice and really reduces their population. That means the squirrel, or the other prey population, doesn't have as much competition for food. It can actually increase its population. So predators will play a role in actually controlling and influencing lots of different prey populations. Even if they don't directly eat them, there's an influence because you may take away competition from that other prey population. You know, cow eats certain plants out of the pasture. The other plants now don't have to fight for sunlight as much. They get more of the nutrients because, oh, the cow ate those. So now the second plant population can increase. So that's always present in every community. When we look at other relationships, we often talk about or use a term called symbiosis. Now, symbiosis is two species that are linked to each other. Their lifestyle connects them. They've evolved and co-evolved together in a similar environment to reach the point they're at in today's world. Coevolution leads to symbiosis. So our lichen on the left here, you guys are familiar with lichens. Lichens are made up of two different species. Lichens are made up of fungi and an algae, or sometimes certain lichen groups are made up of fungi and a cyanobacteria. So those two species work together, have co-evolved for millions and millions and millions of years to form the structure we call lichen. They benefit each other, they exist together. It's a relationship that is very, very long and enduring. The bromeliad, we see different species using the bromeliad. There's a symbiosis there where different species of insects will actually live in the leaves. The leaves of the bromeliad form a kind of a tube, and that tube holds water. Insects will live in there. They'll lay their eggs in there. Those nutrients in there help support and benefit the bromeliad. Bromeliad gives them a place to live. So all sorts of connections there. So the concern is with coevolution and symbiosis, when you influence one of these species, the other one directly is directly impacted or influenced as well. So sometimes it's a great thing to have symbiosis. Other times it can be a problem if something were to happen to one of the populations and you're like, uh-oh, that population's decreased, and now all of a sudden my population's decreased as well. So, all right, so as we look at communities and we look at the dynamics and all these different things that are going on, we really want to make sure we can identify the species we call the keystone species. Okay, so Keystone Species plays a critical role in maintaining the biodiversity of a community. There is no single answer to who can be a keystone species. Lots of species can qualify as a keystone if they play a huge role in helping maintain biodiversity. So if you look at all the benefits, let me give you a big hint, all the benefits of keystone species. Think about what all these guys do. You know, maybe they recycle the nutrients. They eliminate the weak, they're a predator. Pollinators. bats and bees could be keystone species in certain communities, or regulate populations.